Caleb Thornton's hands wouldn't stop shaking as he dug his wife's grave 4 winters ago. Now those same hands trembled again, but this time they held the door open for a stranger. A widow, 2 children, Christmas Eve, and the whole town would damn him for this single act of mercy. They called him a fool. They called him worse. They stripped away everything he'd built: his business, his reputation, his daughter's future. But Caleb Thornton didn't close that door. This is his story. If you want to see how one man's courage changed everything, subscribe now and comment your city below. Let's see how far this story travels. Copper Creek, Wyoming Territory, December 23, 1878. The knock came at dusk. Caleb Thornton set down the knife he'd been using to carve a wooden horse, a Christmas gift for Lucy, that would never replace what she'd really lost. His daughter looked up from the table where she'd been practicing her letters pencil frozen mid-stroke. "Papa, stay here." He moved toward this door, his boots heavy on floorboards. He'd laid himself 5 years ago, when Eleanor was still alive, when his son still breathed, when this cabin held laughter instead of silence. Nobody came to Caleb Thornton's door anymore. He'd made sure of that. The knock came again, desperate, urgent. Caleb pulled back the latch and opened the door to find a woman standing in the bitter wind, a child on each hip, her face raw from cold and something worse, pride, fighting with terror, exhaustion carved into every line. Behind her, the Wyoming prairie stretched white and empty. No wagon, no horse, just footprints already vanishing under fresh snowfall. "Mr. Thornton." Her voice came out steady, but her whole body shook. "I apologize for the intrusion. We have nowhere else to go." Caleb recognized her. The widow from town. Crawford, he thought. Or maybe Collins. He'd seen her at church, always in the back pew, always leaving before the final hymn, always alone with her 2 small ones. The boy couldn't have been more than 7. He stared up at Caleb with eyes too old for his face. One arm wrapped protectively around his mother's neck, the other clutching his baby sister close. The little girl had stopped crying. That scared Caleb more than anything. Children that young should cry when they're cold. When they stopped, it meant something worse. "Please." The woman's voice cracked. "Just for tonight. Just until... Papa." Lucy appeared beside him. Caleb hadn't heard her move. His daughter looked at the strangers, then up at her father, then back at the shivering children. "Papa, it's almost Christmas." 4 words, simple as breathing. Caleb stepped aside. "Come in. Get warm." The woman hesitated, just a heartbeat, pride warring with necessity. Then she crossed his threshold, and Caleb Thornton's life changed forever. He built up the fire, while Lucy led the children toward warmth. The boy Jacob, his mother called him, moved stiffly like his joints had frozen. The little girl, Emma, hadn't made a sound since entering. "Sit them close to the hearth." Caleb's voice came out rougher than intended. "Not too close. Let them warm slow, or it'll hurt worse." The widow Abigail, that was her name, nodded once. She knelt beside her children, rubbing their hands between hers, murmuring words Caleb couldn't hear but understood anyway. "It's all right. We're safe. Mama's here." He'd said those same words to Lucy 100 times after Eleanor died. "Lucy." Caleb gestured toward the kitchen. "Fetch the soup from the stove. Bring bowls." His daughter moved without question. 9 years old, and already she understood that sometimes you helped first and asked questions later. Eleanor had taught her that. Before. "Mr. Thornton." Abigail stood, hands clasped tight in front of her. "I can explain later." He pulled a chair closer to the fire. "Sit. Eat. Explanations can wait until everyone's warm." She opened her mouth to protest. He could see the argument forming, then looked at her children huddled by the hearth and sat without another word. Lucy returned with bowls of rabbit stew. Simple fare, but hot. Caleb watched the widow's children eat careful spoonfuls at first, then faster as hunger overtook caution. The boy shared his bread with his sister without being asked. Good boy, Caleb thought. His father taught him right. Then he remembered the father was dead, and something twisted in his chest. Thank you. Abigail hadn't touched her own bowl. I know what this looks like, a woman showing up at a single man's door, but I didn't. Mrs. Crawford. Caleb kept his voice low. There's a storm coming. I can hear it in the wind. Whatever brought you here, whatever happened, it can wait until morning. Right now you need to eat. Your children need to see their mother eat. She looked at him, then really looked, and Caleb saw something flash across her face. Surprise, maybe, or recognition of a pain that matched her own. She picked up her spoon. The storm hit an hour later. Wind screamed around the cabin walls, hurling snow against windows with a sound like thrown sand. Caleb moved through the rooms by habit, checking shutters, adding wood to the fire, making sure the animals in the barn could survive the night. When he returned, Lucy had given her bed to the Crawford children. She'd piled blankets around them, tucked her own corn-husk doll into Emma's arms, and now sat on the floor nearby, standing guard. Lucy. Caleb kept his voice soft. You need to sleep too. I'm watching them, Papa. She looked up with Eleanor's eyes, serious, certain. Someone needs to watch them. Caleb's throat tightened. All right, but you'll sleep when I tell you. Yes, Papa. He found Abigail in the kitchen, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee she hadn't asked for. He'd made it anyway. She stood near the window, staring out at nothing but white darkness. The storm could last days. Caleb poured his own cup. You're welcome to stay until it passes. And then we figure out what comes next. Abigail turned. In the lamplight, she looked younger than he'd first thought. Not a girl, but not old either. Life had aged her eyes without touching the rest of her face. I owe you an explanation, Mr. Thornton. You don't owe me anything. I do. She set down her cup. You took in strangers on Christmas Eve. You didn't ask why or how or what kind of woman shows up at a man's door with nothing but the children in her arms. You just opened the door. Caleb said nothing. He wasn't sure what to say. My husband died 8 months ago. Abigail's voice stayed level, the way people spoke when they'd run out of tears. Mining accident in Colorado. Cave-in. They never even found his body. She paused. Caleb waited. After he passed, his brother wrote to me. Said there was land here in Wyoming. Family land. Said we could settle it. Build something new. Her hands tightened on the cup. I sold everything we had. Packed what little remained. Traveled 3 weeks to get here. And the land. Gone. The word came out flat. The brother sold it 2 years ago and disappeared with the money. When I arrived, there was nothing. No land, no house, no family. Just lies and an empty claim. Caleb felt anger stir in his gut, the hot, clean kind he hadn't felt in years. The brother took your money. Everything I had left. I tried to find work in town, but... She stopped. It doesn't matter. It matters. Abigail met his eyes. Mrs. Dawson made it clear that women like me aren't welcome. A widow with no husband, no property, no references. She said I was a danger to the moral fabric of Copper Creek. Caleb knew Harriet Dawson. Everyone knew Harriet Dawson. The banker's wife ruled this town's social order with an iron fist wrapped in lace gloves. Her approval meant acceptance. Her disapproval meant exile. Where have you been staying? The boarding house. Until this morning. Abigail's jaw tightened. Mrs. Dawson convinced the owner I was unsuitable. She put us out at noon. Kept my last payment as damages to reputation. The anger in Caleb's gut burned hotter. I tried every door in town. Abigail's voice finally cracked. Every single one. The church was locked. The general store closed early. No one would even speak to me. She looked away. Someone mentioned you. Said the rancher on the north road was a widower. Said you might understand. Who said that? I don't know. I didn't see their face. She pressed her palms to her eyes. God forgive me, I walked 3 miles in the snow because a stranger whispered that you might not turn us away. Caleb thought about his own years of grief. The way the town had given him distance out of respect at first, then habit, then something closer to relief. The lonely widower who didn't want company. Easier to ignore than to comfort. You made the right choice, he said finally. Abigail's hands dropped. What? You made the right choice coming here. Caleb finished his coffee and set down the cup. The spare room needs airing out, but the bed's good. You and your children can sleep there tonight. Mr. Thornton. Caleb. The name felt strange on his tongue. He hadn't invited anyone to use it in years. Mr. Thornton was my father, and he's been dead longer than my wife. Abigail stared at him. Why are you doing this? Because it's Christmas Eve. He moved toward the door. And because my wife would haunt me proper if I left a woman and children to freeze. He paused in the doorway. Get some sleep, Mrs. Crawford. Tomorrow, we figure out what comes next. Abigail. Her voice was quiet. If you're Caleb, then I'm Abigail. Seems only fair. Caleb nodded once and walked away before she could see the ghost of a smile cross his face. Morning came gray and howling. The storm hadn't broken. If anything, it had grown worse overnight. Snow piled against the cabin walls in drifts higher than the windowsills. The world outside had vanished into white nothing. Caleb woke to sounds he'd forgotten existed. A woman's voice, low and gentle, singing something soft. Children's laughter, muffled but real. The sizzle of eggs in a pan. For one moment, still half caught in dreams, he thought Eleanor had come back. Then memory crashed down, and he dressed quickly, not wanting to examine the hollow ache in his chest. He found Abigail at his stove, moving through his kitchen with quiet efficiency. She'd found his eggs, his bacon, the coffee he saved for Sundays. Lucy sat at the table with Jacob and Emma, showing them how to fold paper into birds. I hope you don't mind. Abigail didn't turn around. I'm not accustomed to idleness. It's fine. Caleb's voice came out rough. He cleared his throat. More than fine. Emma looked up from her paper bird and smiled at him. Full and trusting, the way only small children could smile at strangers. Something cracked in Caleb's chest. A wall he'd built 4 years ago, brick by careful brick. Papa, Lucy waved him over. Jacob knows how to whistle with grass. Can he show me? Jacob ducked his head, suddenly shy. It's nothing special, sir, just something my pa taught me. Sir. The boy's formality cut deeper than any knife. I'd like to see that, Caleb said. When the storm breaks, there's plenty of grass in the barn loft. Stays green all winter. Jacob's eyes widened. Really? Really? Abigail set a plate in front of him, eggs, bacon, fresh biscuits. Their hands didn't touch, but Caleb felt her nearness like heat from the stove. Thank you, he said. Thank you for letting me cook. She sat across from him. I needed to feel useful. They ate in silence while the children chattered. Lucy asked Jacob about Colorado. Jacob asked Lucy about the horses. Emma demanded to know if there were any cats. Just old Ezra's barn cat, Lucy said. But he scratches if you pet him wrong. I never pet wrong, Emma declared. Caleb caught Abigail's eye across the table. She was fighting a smile. So was he. The storm lasted 3 days. 3 days of the 6 of them 7, if you counted Ezra, who trudged through the snow from the bunkhouse to check on them each morning, trapped in the cabin together. 3 days of meals, shared stories, told silences that grew less awkward with each passing hour. Ezra took one look at Abigail, and the children nodded once and said, "About time this house had some life in it." Then he went back to the barn without another word. Lucy taught Jacob to play checkers. Jacob taught Lucy to whistle. Emma followed Abigail everywhere, asking questions about everything. Why is snow cold? Why do horses eat grass? Why does Mr. Caleb look so sad? Because he lost someone he loved very much, Abigail said quietly, not knowing Caleb stood in the doorway behind her. Like we lost Papa. Yes, sweetheart, like we lost Papa. Emma considered this. Then he needs hugs. Hugs make sad better. Maybe. But we should let him decide if he wants hugs. That night, Emma walked up to Caleb as he sat by the fire and wrapped her small arms around his knee. She didn't say anything, just held on. Caleb couldn't speak, could barely breathe. He patted her head gently, and Emma smiled up at him before running back to her mother. Lucy watched the whole thing. Her eyes were wet. Papa? Yeah. Can they stay? I mean, after the storm. Caleb looked at his daughter, at the hope in her face that had been absent for 4 long years, and knew his answer before he spoke it. We'll see. On the morning of Christmas Eve, 1 year to the day from when Sarah had died, the storm finally broke. Caleb stood at the window, watching the clouds part to reveal a sky so blue it hurt. Beside him, Abigail stood silent, arms wrapped around herself. I should find somewhere else to go, she said, before the town starts talking. Let them talk. You don't understand. She turned to face him. Harriet Dawson has already decided what I am. A widow with no money, no property, no family connections. In her eyes, there's only one thing a woman like me could want from a man like you. And what's that? Abigail's cheeks flushed. Don't make me say it. Caleb looked at her, really looked at this woman who'd walked 3 miles through a blizzard because a stranger whispered he might show mercy, at the pride she carried like armor, at the fear she couldn't quite hide. Stay through winter, he said. That's all I'm asking. It's the Christian thing to do. Christian charity. Her voice held an edge. Is that what this is? It's whatever we decide it is. Caleb met her eyes. But I won't send you back out into the cold because Harriet Dawson disapproves. I stopped caring what that woman thinks a long time ago. Abigail studied him for a long moment. You're serious? I am. Your reputation was buried with my wife. Caleb's jaw tightened. This town already thinks I'm a ghost who refuses to have the decency to disappear completely. Might as well give them something new to whisper about. The corner of Abigail's mouth twitched. That's a terrible reason to help someone. I've got better ones. He glanced toward the other room where the children's laughter rose and fell like music. But I figured you'd accept the terrible reason faster than the good ones. Abigail was quiet, then slowly she nodded. Through winter, and then we reassess. Fair enough. They stood there in the morning light, not touching, not speaking, just existing in the same space. 2 broken people who'd found each other by accident, or maybe something else entirely. In the other room, Lucy's voice rang out. Papa Jacob, found your old sled. Can we go outside? Caleb looked at Abigail. She was fighting a smile again. Go. He gestured toward the door. I need to check on the horses anyway. Ezra's probably buried himself in the barn to avoid helping. Abigail laughed, short and surprised, like she'd forgotten how. Caleb realized he'd forgotten too. The sound of his own voice making someone laugh. He decided he wanted to remember. Christmas morning came bright and cold. Caleb woke before dawn as he always did, but this time the cabin wasn't silent. He could hear Abigail in the kitchen, already awake, already moving. The soft murmur of her voice as she sang something low and sweet. He dressed and found her making breakfast. She'd been up for hours, judging by the spread on the table, biscuits, eggs, bacon, even a small ham she'd found in the cellar. You didn't have to do all this. I wanted to. Abigail didn't look up from the stove. The children haven't had a proper Christmas since their father died. I wanted them to have something to remember. Caleb thought about the wooden horse he'd carved for Lucy. the one sitting half-finished on his workbench. "I have gifts for them," he said. "The children. Nothing fancy, but—" Abigail finally looked at him. Her eyes were wet. "You didn't have to do that." "I know." He shrugged, uncomfortable with the gratitude in her expression. "But Lucy would never forgive me if Jacob and Emma didn't have something to unwrap." Her knew what he'd almost said brother and sister. Abigail noticed. He saw her notice. But she didn't say anything, just turned back to the stove with a small smile. "Breakfast in 10 minutes. Wake the children." Caleb nodded and walked away, his heart pounding harder than it had any right to. The gifts were simple. For Lucy, the finished wooden horse. For Jacob, a hunting knife Caleb's father had given him at the same age. For Emma, a rag doll Abigail had sewn in secret from scraps she'd found in the cabin. "You made this." Lucy held up the doll, examining the tiny stitches. "Your father let me use his wife's old sewing basket." Abigail glanced at Caleb. "I hope that was all right." Caleb looked at the basket, Eleanor's basket, untouched for 4 years now, open and filled with thread and needles and purpose again. "More than all right," he said quietly. Jacob turned the knife over in his hands, speechless. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked. "Sir, I can't accept this." "It's not charity," Caleb said. "Every man needs a good knife. Your pa would have given you one when you were ready. I figure you're ready." Jacob's lip trembled. He didn't cry. Caleb suspected he'd taught himself not too long ago, but his eyes said everything. "Thank you, sir." "Caleb." The correction came before he could stop it. "You can call me Caleb, if you want." Jacob nodded slowly. "Thank you." "Caleb." Emma squealed and hugged her new doll tight. Lucy laughed and made her wooden horse gallop across the table. And Abigail was crying. Silent tears quickly wiped away, but Caleb saw them. Saw the way she pressed her hand to her mouth to hold in the sound. "I didn't get you anything," she managed. I couldn't." "You gave me something already." She looked at him, confused. Caleb glanced at the room full of noise and warmth and life. At his daughter laughing for the first time in years. At children who'd found safety under his roof. At a woman who'd reminded him that grief didn't have to mean the end of everything. "You gave me my daughter back," he said. "That's worth more than anything you could wrap." Abigail's tears fell faster. She didn't try to hide them anymore. Later, after breakfast, after the children had scattered to play with their new treasures, Caleb found a moment alone with Abigail by the fire. "Church tomorrow," he said. "Christmas Day service." Abigail's expression shuddered. "I don't think that's wise." "Probably not." Caleb poked at the fire. "But we're going anyway, all of us, together. The town will talk." "They're already talking." He set down the poker and faced her. "Question is whether we hide from it or face it head on." Abigail was quiet for a long moment. "You're asking me to walk into that church beside you, in front of everyone, knowing what they'll say. I'm asking you to let them see that their judgment doesn't scare us." Caleb's voice hardened. "Harriet Dawson threw you into the snow on Christmas Eve. Tomorrow I want her to see that you survived." Something flickered in Abigail's eyes. Not fear, something stronger. "All right," she said. "Tomorrow. We face them together." Caleb nodded. He didn't tell her that his hands were shaking. That the thought of walking back into that church, back into a world that had watched him bury his wife and son, terrified him almost as much as it terrified her. But he'd made a choice when he opened that door. Now it was time to live with it. The church bell rang across Copper Creek as Caleb helped Abigail down from the wagon. His hand lingered on hers a moment longer than necessary. She noticed. He noticed her noticing. Neither said a word. Lucy jumped down without help, already reaching for Emma's hand. Jacob climbed out last, standing straight as a soldier, chin high, despite the fear in his eyes. "Stay close." Caleb said quietly. All of you. They walked toward the church doors together. Caleb could feel the stairs before he saw them. Congregation members gathered on the steps, conversations dying mid-sentence, as the Thornton wagon had rolled into view. Harriet Dawson stood at the entrance in her finest Sunday dress. Her husband, the banker, hovered beside her like a shadow in an expensive coat. "Mr. Thornton?" Harriet's smile didn't reach her eyes. "What a surprise to see you at service. It's been... how long?" "Long enough." Caleb tipped his hat. "Mrs. Dawson, Merry Christmas." Harriet's gaze slid to Abigail. The smile vanished. "Mrs. Crawford, I wasn't aware you were still in town. I thought perhaps you'd found accommodations elsewhere." "I have." Abigail's voice stayed steady. "Mr. Thornton was kind enough to offer shelter during the storm." "The storm?" Harriet repeated the words like they tasted sour. "Yes, I heard. 3 days, wasn't it? And yet here you still are. How generous of Mr. Thornton." The implication hung in the cold air. Caleb felt his jaw tighten. "My generosity is my own business, Mrs. Dawson, not yours." Harriet's eyes widened. Around them, the gathered congregation went silent. No one spoke to Harriet Dawson that way. No one had in 20 years. "I meant no offense," Harriet said carefully. "I'm simply concerned for appearances. A widower and a widow under one roof, surely you understand how that looks." "Looks like Christian charity to me." Caleb stepped forward, positioning himself between Harriet and Abigail. The kind we're supposed to practice, not just preach about. Harriet's face flushed red. "Now, if you'll excuse us." Caleb gestured toward the church doors. "We came to worship, not to gossip." He walked past her without waiting for a response. Abigail followed children close behind. The crowd parted to let them through. Not out of respect, Caleb knew, but shock. Inside, he led his family to the front pew. His usual seat, where everyone could see. Lucy slid in first, then Emma, then Jacob. Abigail hesitated. "Caleb, this is..." "Sit down." His voice was gentle but firm. "Don't give them the satisfaction." She sat. Caleb took his place beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. Behind them, whispers exploded like wildfire. Pastor Whitmore took his place at the pulpit. His eyes met Caleb's, a long look that held surprise, concern, and something that might have been approval. "Let us pray," the pastor said. "On this day of Christ's birth, let us remember the lessons of mercy, of compassion, of opening our hearts to those in need." Caleb bowed his head. Beside him, Abigail's hands trembled in her lap. He reached over and covered them with his own. Her breath caught. She didn't pull away. They stayed that way through the entire service. The sermon ended. The final hymn faded. And the congregation turned its collective attention to the front pew like wolves circling wounded prey. Marcus Wells reached them first. The general store owner pushed through the crowd with purpose, his face arranged in an expression of friendly concern that fooled no one. "Caleb, good to see you back at service." Marcus's eyes lingered on Abigail. "And Mrs. Crawford, what a pleasant surprise." "Mr. Wells." Abigail's voice was cool. "Merry Christmas." "Indeed, indeed." Marcus stepped closer than necessary. "I hope you're finding Copper Creek hospitable, despite your circumstances." "She's finding it fine," Caleb said flatly. "Was there something you needed, Marcus?" The store owner's smile tightened. "Just wanted to welcome our newest resident properly. Perhaps I could stop by your ranch sometime, Mrs. Crawford. Make sure you're settling in comfortably." She settled. Caleb moved forward, putting himself between Marcus and Abigail. "And busy. We all are." Something flickered in Marcus's eyes. Caleb recognized it, the look of a man who wasn't used to being dismissed. "Of course." Marcus stepped back. "Well, if you ever need anything, Mrs. Crawford, my store is always open. For you." He walked away. Abigail let out a breath. That man. I know. Caleb's voice was tight. I know exactly what he is. Stay away from him. Before Abigail could respond, Harriet Dawson appeared at Caleb's elbow. Her husband trailed behind, looking uncomfortable. Mr. Thornton, a word, please. We were just leaving. It will only take a moment. Harriet's smile was sharp as a blade. Surely you can spare a moment for old friends. Caleb looked at Abigail. Take the children to the wagon. I'll be right there. Abigail hesitated, then nodded. She gathered the children and moved toward the door, but not before shooting Caleb a look that said, "Be careful." When they were gone, Harriet dropped all pretense of civility. Have you lost your mind? Excuse me. Bringing that woman here, parading her in front of the whole town like she belongs. Harriet's voice dripped venom. Do you have any idea what people are saying? I don't care what people are saying. You should. Harriet leaned closer. They're saying you've taken up with a widow of questionable character. They're saying you've forgotten your poor dead wife. They're saying your daughter is being raised in a house of sin. Caleb's hands clenched into fists. My daughter is being raised in a house of love, for the first time in 4 years. Love. Harriet laughed a brittle, ugly sound. Is that what you're calling it? A woman appears at your door with nothing but children and desperation, and suddenly it's love. It's mercy. It's decency. It's everything this town claims to believe in, but never actually practices. Don't lecture me about belief. Harriet's eyes flashed. I've given more to this church than anyone in Copper Creek. I've maintained standards when others would let them slip. I've protected this community from exactly this kind of what? Caleb's voice rose. Nearby congregants turned to stare. A widow who needed help. Children who needed shelter. What exactly are you protecting the community from, Harriet? Her face went white, then red, then white again. You're making a mistake, she hissed. A terrible mistake. And when it destroys you, when it destroys that little girl of yours, don't say I didn't warn you. She swept away her husband, scurrying behind her. Caleb stood alone in the emptying church, heart-pounding hands shaking. He'd just declared war on the most powerful woman in Copper Creek. God help them all. The ride home was silent. Caleb kept his eyes on the road. Abigail kept hers on the horizon. The children, sensing the tension, stayed quiet in the wagon bed. Finally, Lucy spoke. Papa, are we in trouble? Caleb glanced at his daughter. Her small face was pinched with worry. No, sweetheart. We're not in trouble. Mrs. Dawson looked angry. Mrs. Dawson is always angry about something. Caleb forced a smile. Don't worry about her. But she was mean to Miss Abigail at church. I heard what she said. Caleb's jaw tightened. What did you hear? She said Miss Abigail doesn't belong here, that she should go away. Lucy's voice trembled. But she does belong here. She belongs with us. Doesn't she, Papa? Caleb felt Abigail's eyes on him. He didn't look at her. Yes, he said. She belongs with us. Lucy nodded, satisfied. She turned back to play with Emma, her worry already fading. But Caleb's worry was just beginning. That night, after the children were asleep, Abigail found him on the porch. He stood in the cold, staring at nothing, arms crossed against his chest. You should be inside, she said. It's freezing. Needed to think. About what Harriet said. Caleb didn't answer. That was answer enough. Abigail moved to stand beside him. Their breath clouded the air in twin plumes. I should leave. Don't. Caleb, don't. He turned to face her. Every time something goes wrong, you say you should leave. Stop saying that. It's true. You saw what happened today. The whole town. The whole town can go to hell. Abigail flinched at the venom in his voice. You don't mean that. I do. Caleb stepped closer. I spent 4 years doing everything right, keeping my head down, not making waves. You know what it got me? Nothing. An empty house, a daughter who forgot how to laugh, a life that wasn't worth living. His voice cracked. He looked away. Then you showed up, he continued, you and your children. And in 3 days you gave Lucy back to me. In 3 days you made this house feel like a home again. I'm not giving that up because Harriet Dawson disapproves. Abigail was quiet for a long moment. And if they destroy you, your business, your reputation, everything you've built, then I'll build something new. Caleb met her eyes. With you, if you'll stay. The words hung between them, heavy with meaning neither was ready to fully acknowledge. I'll stay, Abigail said softly, through winter, like we agreed. Caleb nodded. It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't a promise, but it was enough, for now. The attack started 2 days later. Caleb rode into town for supplies and found Marcus Wells's store suddenly out of everything he needed. Flour. Just sold the last bag, sugar shipment delayed, coffee, not a grain to be had. Strange, Caleb said, eyeing the full shelves behind the counter. Looks like plenty to me. Marcus shrugged. Reserved for other customers? Sorry, Caleb. You know how it is. I know exactly how it is. He left without buying anything. On the street, neighbors who'd known him for 10 years suddenly couldn't meet his eyes. Men he'd shared drinks with crossed to avoid him. Women gathered in tight clusters whispering behind gloved hands. Caleb rode home with an empty wagon and a heavy heart. It's starting, he told Abigail that night. They're cutting me off. I'll go to Silverton tomorrow, get supplies there. That's a full day's ride. I know. Caleb rubbed his face. But it's that or watch the children go hungry. Abigail set down her mending. What if I went instead? Absolutely not. Caleb. You're not riding alone to Silverton. Not in this weather. Not with... He stopped. With what? He didn't answer. But they both knew. The roads weren't safe for a woman alone, especially not one the whole territory seemed determined to destroy. Then we go together, Abigail said. Leave Lucy with Ezra. Take Jacob and Emma with us. Make it a trip. And if the town sees us traveling together, you know what they'll say. They're already saying it. Abigail's voice hardened. Let them. Caleb stared at her, at the steel in her spine, the fire in her eyes. Eleanor had been soft, gentle. She'd bent with every wind, accommodating everyone, never making waves. Abigail was nothing like Eleanor. And maybe that was exactly what he needed. All right, he said. We leave at dawn. The trip to Silverton took longer than expected. A broken wheel cost them half a day. They arrived late, cold and exhausted, with barely enough time to gather supplies before the general store closed. But they got what they needed, and the shopkeeper in Silverton didn't look at them like criminals, didn't refuse their money, didn't whisper behind their backs. Thank you kindly, the man said as he loaded their wagon. You folks come back any time. Caleb almost laughed. Such simple words, such basic decency. It shouldn't feel like a gift, but it did. They camped that night by a frozen creek, the children sleeping in the wagon bed under piles of blankets. Caleb built a fire while Abigail heated soup from a jar she'd brought. Feels strange, she said, watching the flames dance. Being away from the ranch. Strange how free almost. She pulled her shawl tighter. In Copper Creek, I can feel their eyes on me constantly. Judging. Condemning. Out here. She gestured at the empty prairie. There's no one. Just us. Just us, Caleb repeated. The firelight caught her face. She wasn't beautiful, not in the way Eleanor had been beautiful, but there was something about her, a strength, a realness. Caleb. Abigail's voice dropped. Can I ask you something? Anything. Your wife, Eleanor. She hesitated. What was she like? The question caught him off guard. No one asked about Eleanor anymore. The town had moved on their sympathy, exhausted their patience with his grief long since expired. She was gentle, Caleb said slowly, kind to everyone, even people who didn't deserve it. She could find good in anyone. She sounds lovely. She was. Caleb stared into the fire. She was also fragile. The frontier was hard on her. She wasn't built for this life. I should have taken her back east when I had the chance. Maybe she'd still be alive. You can't know that. No, but I can wonder. He picked up a stick and poked at the coals. When the fever came for her and the boy, our son Samuel, he was only 2, she tried so hard to fight it. But she was already worn down, already tired. She just slipped away. Abigail was quiet. Then, Henry wasn't gentle. Caleb looked up. He was hard. Abigail's voice stayed even, but her hands tightened in her lap. Strong, determined. He worked himself into the ground trying to make that claim in Colorado pay off. Never took a day of rest. Never stopped pushing. Is that why? The mine collapse. She shook her head. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time, nothing more. But sometimes I think, if he'd been a little less determined, a little more careful. She stopped. It doesn't matter. He's gone. Wondering won't bring him back. No, Caleb agreed. It won't. They sat in silence, the fire crackling between them. I'm not her, Abigail said suddenly. I'm not Eleanor. I'm not gentle or fragile or kind to everyone. I've got a temper and too much pride, and I don't know when to keep my mouth shut. I noticed. She took a breath. I don't want you to think I'm trying to replace her. Whatever this is, whatever we're doing, I'm not. I know who you are. Caleb cut her off gently. You're Abigail Crawford. You walked through a blizzard to save your children. You stared down Harriet Dawson in church. You haven't run away even when running would have been easier. He met her eyes across the fire. You're nothing like Eleanor. And I don't want you to be. Abigail's breath caught. For a long moment, neither of them moved. The fire crackled. The wind whispered across the frozen prairie. Then Emma cried out in her sleep, a small frightened sound, and the moment shattered. Abigail turned away, climbing into the wagon to comfort her daughter. Caleb stayed by the fire, heart pounding, wondering what might have happened if they hadn't been interrupted. Wondering if he was ready to find out. They arrived home the next evening to find Ezra waiting on the porch, shotgun in hand. Caleb was out of the wagon before it stopped rolling. What happened? Riders came. Ezra spat tobacco into the snow. Yesterday afternoon, 3 of them. Didn't give names. What did they want? Asked about the widow, said they had business with her. Abigail went pale. What kind of business? Didn't say. I told them she wasn't here. They said they'd be back. Ezra's weathered face was grim. Didn't like the look of them, boss. Not one bit. Caleb's mind raced. Did Lucy see them? Kept her inside. Told her it was just folks asking directions. Good. Caleb turned to Abigail. Inside. All of you. Now. She didn't argue. She grabbed her children and hurried toward the cabin. Caleb stayed with Ezra. What did they look like? Hard men, trail-worn. Leader had a scar across his chin. Talked like he was used to getting what he wanted. Armed? All of them. Wasn't hiding it neither. Caleb's gut twisted. Did they say when they'd be back? Just said soon. Ezra shifted his weight. You want me to ride to town? Get the sheriff. Sheriff won't help? Caleb knew it in his bones. Not for her, not now. He thought about the empty wagon from the general store, the turned backs on the street, the way Harriet Dawson's threat had hung in the air like poison. When it destroys, you don't say I didn't warn you. Double-check the barn, Caleb said. Make sure the horses are secured, then get some sleep. I'll take first watch. You expecting trouble? I'm expecting everything. Ezra nodded and headed for the barn. Caleb stood alone in the gathering darkness, one hand on the pistol at his hip. 3 men, looking for Abigail, with business they wouldn't name. He had a feeling he knew exactly what kind of business they meant. And he had a feeling the real trouble was just beginning. Inside, Abigail had put the children to bed with unusual speed. Lucy was already asleep. Emma and Jacob were drifting off exhausted from the trip. Abigail waited in the kitchen. "Tell me," Caleb said, closing the door behind him. "Tell you what? Who they are. The men looking for you." Abigail's face went still. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me." Caleb moved closer. "Not now. Not about this. 3 armed men don't ride out in winter to find a widow for no reason. Who are they?" Her composure cracked. Just a little. "I don't know for certain." "Then tell me what you suspect." She was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Henry had a brother. Not the one who promised us land. Another one. Younger. Meaner." "Go on." "His name is Silas. Silas Crawford." Abigail wrapped her arms around herself. He always wanted what Henry had. The claim. The money. Me." Caleb's blood went cold. "You." "Before I married Henry, Silas asked me first. I refused. He didn't take it well." She swallowed. "After Henry died, he showed up at the claim, said everything that was Henry's belonged to him now, including me and the children." "What did you do?" "I ran." Her voice broke. "I took what money I had, grabbed the children, and ran. I thought if I got far enough away—" "He followed you." "I don't know. Maybe. Or maybe he sent men to find me." She looked up at Caleb with terror in her eyes. "If it is Silas, if he's here, he won't touch you." The words came out hard as iron. "Not you, not your children, not while I'm breathing. You don't understand. Silas isn't like other men. He doesn't give up. He doesn't forgive. I don't care what he is." Caleb grabbed her shoulders, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Listen to me. I've lost one family already. I'm not losing another. Whatever it takes, whoever I have to fight, I'll keep you safe. Do you understand?" Tears spilled down Abigail's cheeks. Why would you risk everything for us?" "Because you matter." His voice roughened. "You and your children matter. To Lucy. To this house." He paused. Then softer, "To me." Abigail's breath shuddered. She didn't pull away from his grip. Didn't step back. "Caleb." "I know." He released her shoulders, stepping back before he did something they'd both regret. "I know it's too fast. I know it doesn't make sense. But when those men come back, and they will come back, I need you to trust me. Can you do that?" She wiped her face, straightened her spine. "Yes," she said. "I trust you." It was enough. It had to be enough. Because somewhere out there in the darkness, 3 men were waiting. And Caleb Thornton intended to be ready for them. 3 days passed without sign of the riders. 3 days of watching. Waiting. Jumping at every sound. Caleb barely slept. He kept his rifle by the door, his pistol on his hip, and his eyes on the horizon. Ezra took night watch, while Caleb took days. They worked in shifts, eating when they could, speaking only when necessary. Abigail tried to keep things normal for the children. She cooked meals. She helped Lucy with her letters. She played games with Emma and Jacob. But Caleb saw the fear she carried in her shoulders, the way she flinched at unexpected noises. On the 4th morning, Lucy finally asked the question they'd all been avoiding. "Papa, why does Ezra have his shotgun all the time now?" Caleb set down his coffee. "We're just being careful, sweetheart." "Careful about what?" "Nothing you need to worry about." Lucy's eyes narrowed. She had Eleanor's face, but Caleb's stubborn streak. "You're lying." "Lucy." "Something's wrong. I'm not a baby, I can tell." Her voice rose. "Is someone coming to hurt us? Is someone coming to take Miss Abigail away?" The kitchen went silent. Jacob stopped eating. Emma looked up from her plate with wide eyes. Abigail's hand froze on the coffee pot. Caleb looked at his daughter, at the fear she was trying so hard to hide. "Yes," he said quietly. "Someone might be coming, but I won't let them hurt anyone. I promise." Lucy's lip trembled. "You promise?" "I promise." She nodded once, accepting his word the way children do, completely without reservation. Caleb hoped to God he could keep it. The riders came that afternoon. Caleb was in the barn when he heard hoofbeats. 3 horses moving fast. He grabbed his rifle and stepped outside just as they crested the ridge. 3 men, trail-worn and hard-faced. The leader had a scar across his chin, just like Ezra described. Caleb positioned himself between the riders and the cabin. Behind him, he heard the door open, heard Abigail's sharp intake of breath. "Get inside," he said without turning. "Take the children to the back room. Don't come out until I tell you." "Caleb, now." The door closed. Caleb faced the approaching riders alone. They stopped 20 feet from the porch. The scarred man dismounted slowly, deliberately, making sure Caleb saw the gun on his hip. "Afternoon?" His voice was smooth as oil. "I'm looking for a woman. Abigail Crawford. Been told she might be staying here." "Who's asking?" "Name's Garrett. I work for a man named Silas Crawford. He's got business with Mrs. Crawford, family business." "She's not here." Garrett smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. "Now see, that's strange, because we've been asking around town and folks say different. Say you took in a widow and her children on Christmas Eve. Say she's been living under your roof ever since." "Folks say a lot of things." "They do." Garrett stepped closer. "They also say you've been protective of her. Real protective. Man might wonder why." Caleb's grip tightened on the rifle. Man might wonder why 3 armed strangers are looking for a widow in the middle of winter. "I told you, family business." "What kind of family business requires guns?" Garrett's smile faded. "The kind that ain't your concern. Now I'm going to ask you one more time. Where is Abigail Crawford? And I'm going to tell you one more time. She's not here." For a long moment, nobody moved. Caleb could feel the tension crackling in the air like lightning before a storm. Then Garrett laughed. "All right, friend. Have it your way." He turned back toward his horse. "But you should know Silas Crawford doesn't give up. He doesn't forget. And he doesn't take kindly to men who interfere with his property. She's not his property." Garrett paused 1 foot in the stirrup. "That's where you're wrong. Under Wyoming law, a widow's assets belong to her husband's next male relative. Silas is that relative, which means everything Abigail Crawford has, including those children, belongs to him." Caleb's blood went cold. "I'll be back," Garrett said, mounting his horse, "with more men, and with the law on my side. You might want to think about whether this woman is worth dying for." He rode away. His men followed. The sound of hoofbeats faded into silence. Caleb stood on the porch, rifle in hand, heart pounding. The law. Silas had the law on his side. God help them all. Abigail was waiting when he came inside. Her face was white as bone. "I heard everything." "I figured you did." "He's right, isn't he? About the law." Caleb didn't answer. He didn't need to. "Then it's over." Abigail's voice broke. "He'll come back with a sheriff. He'll take my children. He won't take anything." "You can't stop the law, Caleb. Watch me. This isn't some outlaw you can shoot." She grabbed his arm, forcing him to face her. "Silas has money, connections. He's probably already talked to every judge in the territory. You can't fight that with a rifle." "Then I'll fight it another way." "How?" The question hung in the air. Caleb had no answer. For the first time since this started, he had no idea what to do. That night, Caleb rode into town alone. He went to the one person he thought might help. The one person who'd known Eleanor, who'd watched Caleb bury his wife and son, who'd offered comfort when no one else would. Pastor Thomas Whitmore opened his door on the third knock. "Caleb?" The old man's eyes widened. "It's late. Is something wrong?" "Everything's wrong, Pastor. I need your help." Whitmore stepped aside. "Come in, tell me." Caleb told him. All of it. The Christmas Eve knock, Abigail and her children, Harriet Dawson's cruelty, the writers, Silas Crawford, the threat. When he finished, Whitmore was quiet for a long moment. "You love her," the pastor said finally. "Don't you?" The question caught Caleb off guard. It's not an accusation, son. It's an observation." Whitmore leaned forward. "You wouldn't be here if you didn't. You wouldn't risk everything for a woman you didn't love." Caleb's throat tightened. "I don't know what I feel. I just know I can't let them take her." "Then don't. The law." "The law is what men make it." Whitmore's voice hardened. "And men can be wrong. Silas Crawford may have legal claim to his brother's estate, but he has no claim to those children if their mother is married to someone else." Caleb went still. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that if Abigail Crawford becomes Abigail Thornton, Silas loses his power over her. A husband's rights supersede a brother-in-law's. The children become yours legally." "You're suggesting I marry her." "I'm suggesting you consider it." Whitmore met his eyes. "You've already made your choice, Caleb. You made it when you opened that door. All I'm doing is showing you a way to protect that choice." Caleb's mind raced. Marriage. To a woman he'd known barely a month. A woman who'd come to him as a stranger. A woman who'd brought his house back to life. "Would you do it?" he asked. "Would you perform the ceremony?" "I would." Whitmore nodded slowly. "But not in secret. Not hiding from the town like you're ashamed. If you're going to do this, do it right. Do it in the church in front of everyone and let them say what they will." "They'll try to stop it." "Let them try." The pastor smiled a tired, weathered smile. "I've been preaching mercy and compassion for 40 years. It's about time I got to see some." Caleb rode home through the darkness, Whitmore's words echoing in his mind. Marriage. It was insane, too fast, too desperate, but it might be the only way. Abigail was awake when he returned. She sat by the fire wrapped in a blanket watching the flames dance. "You went somewhere." "Pastor Whitmore." "Why?" Caleb sat down across from her. His heart was pounding so hard he was sure she could hear it. "He had an idea, a way to protect you and the children from Silas." "What kind of idea?" Caleb took a breath. "Marriage." Abigail went very still. "He said if you were married to someone else, Silas would lose his claim. A husband's rights would protect you. The children would be legally mine." "Yours." "Yes." Silence stretched between them. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind moaned. "Are you asking me to marry you?" Abigail's voice was barely audible. "I'm asking if you'd consider it." "For protection." "For protection," Caleb agreed. "And for—" He stopped, started again. "And because I don't want you to leave. I don't want to go back to the way things were before. I don't want this house to be empty again." Abigail's eyes filled with tears. "Caleb." "I know it's not love. Not yet. I know it's fast and desperate and probably foolish. But I also know that when I think about you leaving, when I think about Silas taking your children, I can't breathe." He reached across the space between them and took her hand. "Marry me, Abigail. Not because you have to, because we could build something real, something worth fighting for." A tear slipped down her cheek, then another. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I'll marry you." Caleb's heart stuttered. "You're sure?" I'm terrified. She laughed through her tears. But I'm sure. He lifted her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles gently. Sunday, he said. We'll do it Sunday. In the church. In front of everyone. They'll try to stop us. Let them try. For the first time since this nightmare began, Abigail smiled. And Caleb realized he'd do anything, fight anyone, face anything to see that smile again. Word spread through Copper Creek like wildfire. By Saturday morning, the whole town knew Caleb Thornton planned to marry the widow Crawford. Reactions ranged from shock to outrage to something that might have been grudging respect. Harriet Dawson's reaction was none of those things. She appeared at Caleb's ranch at noon, her husband's carriage kicking up dust as it raced down the road. She didn't wait to be invited. She climbed down and marched toward the porch where Caleb stood waiting. "You've lost your mind," she announced. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Dawson." "Don't you good afternoon me?" Her face was flushed with rage. "Marriage? To that woman? Have you any idea what you're doing?" "I know exactly what I'm doing. You're destroying yourself, your family name, your daughter's future. For what? For a widow you've known a month. For a woman I love." The words came out before Caleb could stop them. But once they were spoken, he realized they were true. He loved her. God help him, he loved her. Harriet's mouth opened, closed, opened again. "Love," she spat. "You don't know what love is. Love is sacrifice. Love is doing what's proper even when it hurts. This is madness." "Maybe." Caleb stepped forward. "But it's my madness, and it's my life. You don't get to decide how I live it. The town will never accept this. Then the town can go to hell." Harriet's eyes widened. Behind her, the door opened. Abigail stepped onto the porch, Jacob and Emma trailing behind her. Lucy followed last chin high, standing beside the woman who would become her stepmother. "Mrs. Dawson." Abigail's voice was calm. "Is there something you need?" Harriet looked at them, the children, the widow, the widower, all of them standing together like a wall. "You'll regret this," she said to Caleb. "Both of you. When the town turns its back. When your business fails. When your daughter grows up shunned and friendless. You'll regret this." "Maybe," Abigail said. "But at least we'll be together when we do." Something flickered across Harriet's face. Pain, maybe, or recognition. Then she turned and walked back to her carriage without another word. Caleb watched her go. Beside him, Abigail let out a shaky breath. "That went well," she said dryly. Caleb laughed. He couldn't help it. After everything, the threats, the fear, the sleepless nights, Harriet Dawson's fury suddenly seemed small, manageable. "One down," he said. "Whole town to go." The church filled faster than Caleb expected. By the time he arrived with his family, he kept thinking every pew was packed. Some had come to witness. Some had come to protest. Some had come simply because nothing this interesting had happened in Copper Creek in years. Pastor Whitmore stood at the altar, Bible in hand. His face was serene, but Caleb caught the tension in his shoulders. They walked down the aisle together, Caleb in front, Abigail beside him, the children following. Every step felt like a mile. Every eye in the room burned into their backs. Halfway to the altar, Marcus Wells stepped into the aisle. "This is wrong," his voice carried through the church. "This whole thing is wrong, and you all know it." Murmurs rippled through the congregation. Caleb stopped walking. "Move aside, Marcus." "I won't." Marcus's face twisted with something ugly. "This woman, she's not fit to be anyone's wife. She's a fortune hunter, a schemer. She targeted you because you were vulnerable, and now she's trapping you into marriage." "Funny thing about traps." Caleb's voice stayed level. "I walked into this one willingly. She's using you. She's saving me." Caleb stepped closer. "And I'm saving her. That's what people do when they care about each other. You don't know anything about her. I know enough. Caleb's patience snapped. I know she walked through a blizzard to protect her children. I know she endured your town's cruelty with more dignity than any of you deserve. I know she's been more kindness to my daughter in 2 months than this whole community has shown in 4 years. His voice rose. And I know you've wanted her since before she married Henry Crawford. Everyone in town knows it. So maybe, just maybe, your objections have more to do with jealousy than morality. Marcus's face went purple. How dare you? Enough! The voice came from the altar. Pastor Whitmore had stepped forward, his presence commanding in a way Caleb had never seen before. Mr. Wells, you will sit down or you will leave. This is a house of God, not a courtroom. Marcus sputtered. Pastor, surely you can't condone... I condone love, Mr. Wells. I condone mercy. I condone 2 people choosing to build a life together despite every obstacle placed in their path. The pastor's voice hardened. What I don't condone is a man using scripture to justify his own envy. Now, sit down. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then Marcus stepped aside. He didn't sit. He stormed out of the church, slamming the door behind him. But he was gone. Caleb led Abigail the rest of the way to the altar. His hands were shaking. So were hers. Dearly beloved, Pastor Whitmore began, we are gathered here today. The ceremony was short, simple. The vows were traditional love, honor, cherish, but they felt new on Caleb's tongue. Felt real. When Whitmore asked if anyone objected, the church went silent. Harriet Dawson sat rigid in her pew, lips pressed tight, but she said nothing. Then, by the power vested in me, Whitmore said, I pronounce you husband and wife. Caleb kissed Abigail. Gentle, brief, a promise more than a passion. The congregation sat in stunned silence. Then Lucy started clapping. Emma joined in. Then Jacob. Then slowly a few others. Not many, not most, but enough. Enough to remind Caleb that not everyone in Copper Creek had lost their humanity. They walked out of the church as husband and wife. The winter sun felt warmer somehow. The air felt lighter. They were halfway to the wagon when the riders appeared. 6 men this time. Garrett in front, that same oily smile on his scarred face. And beside him, a man who could only be Silas Crawford. He looked like Henry, Caleb realized. Same build, same coloring. But where Henry's face had been kind, according to Abigail, Silas's was carved from stone. Well, well. Silas dismounted slowly. Looks like we're just in time for the celebration. Caleb pushed Abigail behind him. Stay back. Now that's not very friendly. Silas approached with predatory calm. Here I am, come all this way to collect my brother's family, and you're treating me like some kind of criminal. You are a criminal. Strong words from a man who just married my property. She's not your property. Caleb's hand moved to his pistol. She's my wife. Those are my children now. You have no claim here. Is that so? Silas smiled. It was a terrible thing to see. Garrett, did you hear that he thinks marriage changes things? I heard it, boss. See, here's what you don't understand. Silas stepped closer. I've got papers, legal papers, signed by a judge in Colorado. They say Abigail Crawford owes me $1,700 my brother's debts passed to his widow. If she can't pay, she forfeits her children to my custody. Abigail gasped. That's a lie. Is it? Got the documents right here. Silas patted his coat. Witnessed and everything. Now you can fight this in court if you want. Might take months, years even. Meanwhile, I take the children while the lawyers argue. Caleb's blood turned to ice. You won't touch them. Try to stop me. Silas's smile widened. Oh, wait, you can't. Because I've already talked to your sheriff. He's on his way right now with a deputy and a court order. Everything nice and legal. As if on cue, hoofbeats sounded from the edge of town. Sheriff Carter appeared riding hard face grim. "Caleb." The sheriff pulled up short. "I'm sorry. I have to—" "You don't have to do anything." Caleb's voice was deadly quiet. "You can turn around and ride back the way you came. It's a court order, legal and binding. It's forged, and you know it." "I don't know any such thing." The sheriff wouldn't meet his eyes. "I just know what I'm required to do." The congregation had gathered outside the church now. They watched in horrified silence as their sheriff sided with the stranger. Caleb looked at the crowd, at the people who'd known him for years, who'd done business with him, shared meals with him, mourned with him when Eleanor died. Not one of them stepped forward. "Please," Abigail's voice broke. "Please, someone, anyone, don't let him take my children." Silence. Uncomfortable shifting. Eyes that wouldn't meet hers. Harriet Dawson stared at the ground. "Well," Silas clapped his hands together. "If no one objects, I believe we'll be on our way. Garrett, get the children." Garrett moved toward Jacob and Emma. Jacob stepped in front of his sister, small fists raised. "Don't touch her." "Brave boy." Garrett reached for him. "Too bad bravery don't mean much against—" Caleb's fist connected with Garrett's jaw before anyone saw him move. The man went down hard. Caleb stood over him, pistol drawn, pointing at Silas's chest. "I said you won't touch them." Every gun in Silas's group cleared leather at once. 5 barrels aimed at Caleb's head. "That was stupid," Silas said calmly. "Now I have to kill you in front of all these good people. Self-defense, of course. You attacked my man." "Try it." Caleb's hand didn't waver. "I'll put a bullet through your heart before your boys pull their triggers. You'd die." "Maybe, but you'd die first." They stared at each other. Neither blinked. The tension stretched to breaking point. Then a voice rang out from the crowd. "That's enough." Everyone turned. Doc Samuel Hendricks pushed his way to the front, medical bag in hand, eyes clear for the first time in years. Behind him came Martha Doyle, the oldest woman in Copper Creek, leaning on her cane but standing straight. "What did you say?" Silas demanded. "I said that's enough." Doc Hendricks stepped forward. "I've watched this town turn its back on decency for 2 months. I've watched good people become cowards because they were afraid of gossip. Well, I'm done watching. This doesn't concern you, old man. It concerns all of us." Martha's voice cracked like a whip. "That woman saved my granddaughter last week. Knew exactly which herbs to use for the fever. Sat with her all night when I was too old and too tired." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "She helped my boy too," someone else called out. "When he cut his hand on the plow, would have lost the whole hand if not for her." "And me," another voice added. "And me." One by one, people stepped forward. Not everyone, not most, but enough. Ezra appeared at Caleb's shoulder, shotgun ready. Then Floyd Whitlock, guilt and determination warring on his face. Then Pastor Whitmore, Bible clutched to his chest like a shield. "You're outnumbered, Mr. Crawford," the pastor said quietly. "And outmatched. Whatever papers you've got, we both know they won't hold up to scrutiny. I suggest you leave while you still can." Silas's face contorted with rage. He looked at his men, at the growing crowd of armed townspeople, at the sheriff who was slowly backing away. "This isn't over," he snarled at Caleb. "You hear me? This isn't— It's over." Caleb lowered his pistol. "Go home, Silas. Forget you ever had a brother. Because the next time you come for my family, I won't aim for your chest." He let the threat hang in the air. Silas's jaw worked. His hand twitched toward his gun. Then Garrett groaned on the ground, and the moment passed. "Mount up," Silas ordered his men. "We're leaving." They rode away. The sound of hoofbeats faded into silence, and then Abigail was in Caleb's arms, sobbing against his chest, and the children were clinging to his legs, and Lucy was crying and laughing at the same time. "It's over," Caleb murmured into Abigail's hair. "It's over. You're safe." But even as he said it, he knew the truth. It wasn't over. The town had defended them today. But tomorrow, when the fear faded and the gossip returned, would they stand firm? Caleb held his family close and prayed they would. Because if they didn't, he'd just made enemies of the most powerful people in Copper Creek. And enemies like that didn't forget. The ride home felt different. Caleb held the reins with one hand, Abigail's fingers intertwined with his other. Behind them, the children huddled together in the wagon bed, still shaking from what they'd witnessed. Nobody spoke until they reached the ranch. Ezra met them at the gate. The old man's face was grim. They're gone. For now. Caleb helped Abigail down. But Silas Crawford isn't the type to give up easy. Didn't figure he was. Ezra spat tobacco into the dirt. What's the plan? Keep watch, same as before. Caleb looked at his wife. The word still felt strange and wonderful, and made a decision. And tomorrow, I'm riding to Helena. Abigail's head snapped toward him. Helena? Why? Because Silas mentioned papers, documents, a judge in Colorado who signed off on his claim. Caleb's jaw tightened. If those papers are real, we need to know, and if they're forged, we need proof. That's a 3-day ride. I know. You'd leave us alone for almost a week. Not alone. Caleb nodded toward Ezra. And I'll ask Floyd Whitlock to stay too. He owes me that much after 2 months of pretending I didn't exist. Abigail's face showed fear and something else. Trust, maybe. The beginning of it. All right, she said quietly. Do what you have to do. That night, their first as husband and wife, they lay in the same bed for the first time, fully clothed, not touching. The silence stretched between them like a living thing. This is strange, Abigail whispered finally. Which part? All of it. Being married again, sharing a bed, having someone who... She stopped. Who what? Who chose me? Her voice cracked. Henry and I, we were practical. Our families arranged it. We grew to care for each other, but it wasn't this. Caleb turned onto his side, facing her in the darkness. What is this? I don't know yet. Abigail met his eyes. But it feels different. Bigger somehow. Caleb reached across the space between them. His fingers found hers. We have time to figure it out. Do we? The fear was back in her voice. Silas won't stop. You know that. He'll come back with lawyers, with more men, with... Then we'll face it together. Caleb squeezed her hand. That's what married people do. Abigail was quiet for a long moment. Then she moved closer, resting her head on his shoulder. Thank you, she breathed. For everything. Caleb pressed his lips to her hair. Go to sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day. She slept. Eventually. Caleb didn't. He lay awake until dawn, listening to her breathe, planning his next move. He left at first light. Floyd Whitlock arrived an hour after Caleb departed, hat in hand, guilt written across his weathered face. Mrs. Thornton. He stumbled over the new name. I'm here to help. Whatever you need. Abigail studied him from the porch. This man who'd crossed the street to avoid her husband, who'd let fear override friendship for 2 solid months. Why now? Floyd flinched. Excuse me. Why are you helping now after everything? The man's shoulders sagged. Because I should have helped sooner. Because Caleb's been my friend for 15 years and I abandoned him when he needed me most. Because yesterday, watching him stand alone against those men, I realized what a coward I'd been. Abigail let him stand there, squirming in his shame. Then she stepped aside and opened the door. Come in, Mr. Whitlock. I'll make coffee. The days without Caleb crawled by. Abigail kept the children busy. She taught Lucy to make bread from scratch. She helped Jacob practice his reading. She held Emma during thunderstorms and told her stories about brave princesses who didn't need rescuing. But the nights were hard. Every creak of the floorboards made her heart race. Every distant hoofbeat sent her reaching for the rifle Caleb had left behind. She barely slept, and when she did, nightmares of Silas Crawford's cold smile jolted her awake. On the third night, Lucy found her crying in the kitchen. "Miss Abigail." The girl hesitated in the doorway. "Mama." The word stopped Abigail's breath. Lucy had never called her that before. "What is it, sweetheart?" "I heard you crying." Lucy padded closer, bare feet silent on the wooden floor. "Are you scared Papa won't come back?" Abigail wiped her face quickly. "No, sweetheart, your Papa will come back." "Then why are you crying?" "Because I'm terrified. Because Silas Crawford is out there somewhere planning his next move. Because I love your father and I don't know when that happened. Sometimes grown-ups cry when they feel too many things at once," Abigail said instead. "Happy things and scary things all mixed together." Lucy considered this. "Like when I got my wooden horse, I cried then, but I was happy." "Exactly like that." The girl climbed into Abigail's lap, wrapping thin arms around her neck. "I'm glad you're my mama now," Lucy whispered. "I missed having a mama." Abigail held her tight and let the tears fall freely. Caleb returned on the 5th day. Abigail saw the dust cloud first, then the familiar shape of his horse coming over the ridge. She ran to meet him before she could stop herself, propriety forgotten. He dismounted and caught her in his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. "You're back." She pressed her face into his chest. "You're back." "I'm back." His voice was rough. "And I've got news." The children swarmed around them. Jacob demanded to know if there were outlaws. Emma asked if Caleb brought presents. Lucy simply held on to his leg and wouldn't let go. Inside, after the children were settled with Ezra and Floyd, Caleb laid papers on the kitchen table. "The documents Silas has are forged." Caleb's eyes gleamed. "I found the judge whose signature he faked. The man's been dead for 2 years, died of fever in the summer of '76. Abigail's hand flew to her mouth. "Then he has no claim." "None. And better than that, I found your brother-in-law, the real one, Thomas Crawford." "Thomas?" Abigail's voice shook. "He's alive. Living in Helena. Changed his name after Silas threatened to kill him for his share of the family inheritance." Caleb pulled out another paper. "He gave me a sworn statement. Says Silas forged documents to take control of your husband's estate. Says Henry's debts were paid in full before he died. Says everything Silas has told you is a lie." Abigail sat down heavily. Her legs wouldn't hold her anymore. "Then it's over, really over." "Almost." Caleb's face darkened. "I also learned something else. Silas Crawford isn't just a con man. He's wanted in 3 territories for fraud, assault, and murder." "Murder?" "A woman in Colorado, his own wife, beat her to death and made it look like an accident." Caleb's hands clenched. "The authorities have been looking for him for 2 years." Abigail felt sick. That man had touched her children, had threatened to take them. "What do we do?" "We take these documents to the sheriff. The real sheriff, not Carter, the federal marshal in Silverton, and we let the law handle Silas Crawford once and for all." For the first time in months, Abigail felt hope. Real, solid hope. They rode to Silverton the next morning, the whole family together. Marshal Benson listened to their story with growing interest, examined the documents with practiced eyes, and made a decision within the hour. "These are good," he said, tapping Thomas Crawford's statement. "Real good. Enough to issue a warrant. For Silas. For Silas Crawford and every man riding with him." The marshal stood. "I'll need to wire some other jurisdictions. Coordinate. But within the week we should have him in custody." Abigail's knees went weak with relief. "Thank you, Marshal." "Don't thank me yet, ma'am." Benson's face was serious. "Crawford's been running from the law for years. He's slippery. And cornered animals are dangerous." "What are you saying?" "I'm saying watch your backs until we catch him. Don't go anywhere alone. Don't trust strangers. The marshal met Caleb's eyes. Can you handle that? I can handle anything, Caleb said, as long as my family is safe. They returned to Copper Creek as the sun was setting and found their ranch in flames. Abigail's scream tore through the twilight. Their cabin was an inferno. Flames clawed at the sky, smoke billowing in great black clouds. The children. She lunged for the wagon. Lucy, Jacob, Emma. Caleb grabbed her arm. They're not inside. They're with Ezra. Remember, at his place. But the cabin's empty. His voice was steel. No one's hurt. Abigail sagged against him, heart hammering. A figure emerged from behind the barn. Then another. Then 4 more. Silas Crawford walked toward them, firelight dancing in his dead eyes. You just couldn't leave it alone, could you? His voice carried across the crackling flames. Had to go digging. Had to find Thomas. Had to ruin everything. Caleb pushed Abigail behind him. It was already ruined. You just didn't know it yet. Maybe. Silas drew his pistol. But I figure if I can't have what's mine, nobody will. She was never yours. She was always mine. Silas's face twisted. From the first moment I saw her before my brother even knew her name, she was supposed to be mine. And you, a broke-down widower with nothing but grief, you think you can take her from me. I didn't take her. Caleb's hand hovered over his gun. She chose me. Something shattered in Silas's expression, the last thread of sanity snapping. Then she can die with you. He raised his pistol. Caleb drew. The gunshot split the night. Silas staggered backward, clutching his shoulder. Blood seeped between his fingers. But he didn't fall. His men surged forward, guns blazing. Caleb shoved Abigail behind the wagon and returned fire. One man went down, then another. Run, Caleb shouted. Get to Ezra's. I won't leave you. You have to. He caught her face in his hands, his eyes burning into hers. The children need you. Go, now. Abigail's heart shattered. But she ran. She ran through smoke and chaos, through the darkness beyond the firelight. Behind her, gunshots echoed like thunder. She didn't look back. Couldn't look back. Ezra's place was a mile away, the longest mile of her life. She burst through the door to find the old man already armed, the children huddled in the corner. Mama! Jacob ran to her. What's happening? Stay here. Abigail grabbed Ezra's spare rifle. All of you stay here. Where are you going? Lucy's voice was high with terror. To help your father. Abigail, wait. Ezra reached for her, but she was already gone. She ran back toward the flames, toward the gunfire that had gone horribly, terrifyingly silent. When she reached the ranch, the fighting was over. Bodies littered the ground. Silas's men, all of them down. Silas himself lay on his back, eyes staring at nothing, a hole in his chest where his heart used to be. And Caleb. Caleb was on his knees. Blood soaked his shirt. His face was pale as death. No. Abigail dropped the rifle and ran to him. No, no, no. Hey. His voice was weak. Thought I told you to run. I came back. Tears streamed down her face. I had to come back. Stubborn woman. He smiled, that ghost of a smile she loved so much. Always were stubborn. Don't you dare. She pressed her hands to the wound in his side. Don't you dare leave me. Wasn't planning on it. He coughed. Blood flecked his lips. But if I do, you won't. If I do. His hand found hers, slick with blood. Tell Lucy I love her. Tell the children they're mine. Tell them yourself. Abigail's voice broke. You're going to tell them yourself. Do you hear me, Caleb Thornton? You're not allowed to die. His eyes fluttered closed. Caleb. Nothing. Caleb. Hoofbeats thundered behind her. She didn't turn, didn't care. The whole world could burn as long as she could keep him breathing. "Mrs. Thornton." Someone grabbed her shoulder. Doc Hendricks. His face was grim but determined. "Move aside. Let me see him." "He's not breathing." "He's breathing. Barely." The doctor's hands were already working, probing the wound. "The bullet's still in there. I need to get it out, but not here. We need to move him." "Where?" "My office. It's closer than Silverton." Doc Hendricks looked at the men behind him. Floyd, Whitlock, Pastor Whitmore, a dozen others who'd ridden at the sound of gunfire. "Help me get him in the wagon. Carefully. Any jostling could kill him." They lifted Caleb like he was made of glass. Abigail climbed in beside him, cradling his head in her lap, whispering prayers she'd forgotten she knew. The ride to town took forever. Doc Hendricks' office was small and cramped and smelled of carbolic acid. Abigail waited outside while the doctor worked. Hours passed, or minutes. She couldn't tell anymore. The children arrived with Ezra. Lucy's face was streaked with tears. Jacob held Emma tight, both of them silent with fear. "Mama." Lucy's voice was tiny. "Is Papa going to die?" Abigail pulled all three children into her arms. "I don't know, sweetheart. I don't know." They held each other and waited. The door opened just before dawn. Doc Hendricks emerged, his shirt soaked with blood, his face exhausted. But was that relief? "He's alive." Abigail's legs gave out. Floyd caught her before she hit the floor. "The bullet nicked his lung," the doctor continued. "Lost a lot of blood. But I got it out clean and he's strong. Stronger than most men I've treated. If there's no infection..." He allowed himself a small smile. "He should make a full recovery." Lucy burst into tears. Jacob's stoic mask finally cracked. Emma didn't understand but cried because everyone else was crying. Abigail couldn't speak. Couldn't do anything but breathe. He was alive. Caleb Thornton was alive. She pushed past the doctor into the room where her husband lay. His face was gray, his breathing shallow, but his eyes opened when she took his hand. "Hey." His voice was barely a whisper. "Hey, yourself." She was crying again. Couldn't stop. "You scared me." "Sorry." "Don't ever do that again." "Can't promise." He squeezed her fingers weakly. "But I'll try." The children crowded around the bed. Lucy kissed his forehead. Jacob touched his arm like he was checking to make sure he was real. Emma climbed up beside him, despite everyone's protests, and curled against his uninjured side. "Family," Caleb murmured. His eyes found Abigail's. "This is family." "Yes." She pressed her forehead to his. "This is family." Outside, the sun rose over Copper Creek. The fire had taken their cabin. Everything they owned was gone. Clothes, furniture, memories. The wooden horse Caleb had carved for Lucy. The herbs Abigail had dried. All of it ash and cinders. But as Abigail sat beside her husband's bed, children sleeping in chairs around her, she realized something. They'd lost everything. And they'd lost nothing at all. Because what mattered, the only thing that had ever mattered, was right here in this room. Breathing. Healing. Together. The town of Copper Creek would rebuild their cabin. Abigail would learn that later how the same neighbors who'd shunned them would come together, shame and guilt, driving them to hammer and nail and hard work. How Harriet Dawson herself would donate lumber, her face tight, but her actions speaking louder than her silence. But that was later. For now, Abigail simply held her husband's hand and watched him sleep. For now, that was enough. Recovery was slow. Caleb spent 2 weeks in Doc Hendricks' office before the doctor would let him leave. 2 weeks of Abigail sleeping in a chair beside him, of children visiting every day, of townspeople stopping by with food and well wishes and awkward apologies. "I don't understand," Abigail said one afternoon, watching Martha Doyle leave with an empty pie tin. "These are the same people who wouldn't speak to us a month ago." Guilt's a powerful thing. Caleb shifted in the bed, wincing at the pull in his side. So is seeing a man nearly die for what's right. They should have stood with us before. They should have. He took her hand. But they're standing with us now. That has to count for something. Abigail wanted to argue, wanted to hold on to her anger, her justified resentment. But she thought about Lucy calling her mama, about Jacob finally laughing again, about Emma sleeping peacefully through the night for the first time since Colorado. "I suppose it does," she admitted. Caleb smiled. "Look at you, learning to forgive. Don't push it." He laughed, then grimaced, hand flying to his wound. "Don't make me laugh. Hurts too much." "Then stop being funny." "Can't help it. You bring it out in me." Abigail leaned down and kissed him. Soft, slow. The first real kiss they'd shared as husband and wife. When she pulled back, his eyes were bright. What was that for? For not dying. She touched his face. "For giving me a family. For standing by us when no one else would. I'd do it again." His voice was fierce. 100 times. "I know." She kissed him again. "That's why I love you." The words slipped out before she could stop them. Caleb went very still. "Say that again." "I love you." She was crying now again, always crying these days. "I love you, Caleb Thornton. I don't know when it happened. Maybe that first night when you let us in. Maybe when you stood up to Harriet Dawson. Maybe when you took a bullet to keep us safe. But I love you. And I'm tired of pretending I don't." Caleb reached up and brushed the tears from her cheeks. "I love you too." His voice cracked. "I think I've loved you since you walked through that door covered in snow, too proud to admit you needed help. I just didn't know what to call it." They held each other as the afternoon light faded. And for the first time since Eleanor died, Caleb Thornton felt whole. They brought him home 3 days later. Home to a brand new cabin raised on the ashes of the old. Smaller than before, not quite finished, but standing. Solid. Real. The whole town had turned out for the building. Men who'd never lifted a hammer before learned to swing one. Women who'd whispered behind their hands brought food and curtains and quilts. Even the children helped carrying nails and fetching water. Harriet Dawson had supervised it all. She stood on the porch when the Thornton wagon rolled up, her face unreadable. "Mrs. Thornton." She nodded to Abigail. "Mr. Thornton, welcome home." Caleb studied her for a long moment. "This your doing?" "Partly." Harriet's chin lifted. "I organized. Others contributed." "Why?" The question hung in the air. After everything she'd done, everything she'd said, why Harriet was quiet for a long time. "Because I was wrong." The words seemed to cost her something. "Because I let fear make me cruel. Because when I watched you nearly die defending your family, I saw my own husband. 40 years ago. He stood alone too once. For me." Her voice broke. She collected herself quickly. "I can't undo what I did, but I can try to make it right. If you'll let me." Abigail looked at Caleb. He looked at her. Then Abigail stepped forward and took Harriet Dawson's hand. "Thank you," she said simply. "For the cabin. For today. For trying." Harriet's composure cracked, just for a second. Then she squeezed Abigail's hand and walked away, spine straight, head high, but something changed in the set of her shoulders. Something softer. "Well," Caleb let out a breath. "Didn't see that coming." "Neither did I." Abigail slipped her arm through his. "But I think I understand." "Yeah. Fear makes us all do terrible things." She helped him toward the door of their new home. "But it's never too late to choose different." The children raced ahead, eager to explore. Lucy claimed the best bedroom. Jacob found a fishing pole someone had left as a gift. Emma discovered a new rag doll on her pillow, one she'd treasure for the rest of her life. Caleb stood in the doorway, taking it all in. "It's not the same," he said quietly. "The old place, Eleanor's place, it's gone." "I know." Abigail stood beside him. "Does that hurt?" "Some." He was quiet for a moment. "But I think maybe it needed to burn. The old life. The old grief. All of it. He turned to face her. This is new. This is ours. Not mine and Eleanor's, not yours and Henry's. Ours. Abigail felt tears threaten again. Ours, she agreed. He kissed her forehead, then her nose, then her lips. Welcome home, Mrs. Thornton. She smiled against his mouth. Welcome home. Spring came slow to Wyoming that year. The snow melted in patches revealing brown earth and the first stubborn shoots of green. Caleb's wound healed faster than Doc Hendricks expected, though he still favored his left side when he thought no one was watching. Abigail always noticed. 3 months had passed since the fire. 3 months since Silas Crawford died in the dirt with a bullet in his chest. 3 months since the town of Copper Creek began its slow, awkward journey toward redemption. The cabin was finished now. Not just standing, but complete with curtains Abigail had sewn, furniture Caleb had built, and children's drawings pinned to every available wall. Papa! Lucy burst through the door, braids flying. The chickens laid 12 eggs today. 12? That's a lot of eggs. Caleb looked up from the harness he was mending. What are we going to do with all of them? Mama says we can sell some in town. Jacob's going to help me carry them. Mama. The word still made Caleb's chest tight. Lucy had started using it naturally without hesitation sometime during those terrible weeks when he'd been recovering. Abigail had cried the first time she heard it. Happy tears, she'd insisted. The best kind. Where is your mama? In the garden with Emma. They're planting carrots. Lucy wrinkled her nose. I don't like carrots. You'll like them when they're fresh from the ground. That's what Mama said. Lucy's face turned serious. Papa, can I ask you something? Always. Are we going to stay here forever in Copper Creek? Caleb set down the harness. That's the plan. Why you want to go somewhere else? No. Lucy climbed onto the bench beside him. I just wanted to make sure. Some of the kids at school said... She stopped. Said what? That people like us don't stay. That you'll get tired of Miss Abigail and send her away. That families made from strangers don't last. Caleb's jaw tightened. He'd thought the cruelty had stopped. Apparently children had longer memories than their parents. Come here. He pulled Lucy onto his lap. You listen to me. Abigail is your mama now. Jacob and Emma are your brother and sister. This family wasn't made from strangers. It was made from choice. And that makes it stronger, not weaker. But the other kids don't know what they're talking about. Caleb's voice softened. Do you remember what it was like before, when it was just you and me in the old cabin? Lucy nodded slowly. It was quiet. Too quiet. It was lonely. Caleb tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. I was so sad after your mother died that I forgot how to be happy. I forgot how to laugh. I forgot how to be a good papa. You were always a good papa. No, sweetheart, I wasn't. But Abigail and her children, they reminded me. They brought this family back to life. He tilted her chin up. So, when those kids at school say things, you tell them this, the Thorntons don't quit. We don't send people away. And we don't break promises. Lucy's eyes filled with tears. I love you, Papa. I love you too, sweetheart. More than anything. She hugged him tight, then squirmed off his lap and ran outside to find her siblings. Caleb watched her go, heart full and aching at the same time. She asked you about staying. He turned. Abigail stood in the doorway, dirt on her hands and worry in her eyes. She did. I heard what the children have been saying. Abigail moved closer. I wanted to tell you, but I didn't want to. You should have told me. I know. She sat beside him. I was afraid. Of what? That you'd wonder if they were right. Her voice dropped. That maybe families made from strangers don't last. That maybe you'd wake up one day and realize you'd made a mistake. Caleb took her face in his hands. Listen to me. I've made a lot of mistakes in my life. Marrying you wasn't one of them. Taking in your children wasn't one of them. The only mistake I ever made was waiting so long to let myself live again." Abigail's eyes glistened. "Caleb, I love you." He said it firmly, leaving no room for doubt. "I love Jacob like he's my own son. I love Emma like she's my own daughter. This family is real. It's permanent. And nothing, not gossip, not doubt, not anything is going to change that." She kissed him, deep and desperate, like she was sealing a promise. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. "Well," Abigail smoothed her apron, "I should get back to the carrots." "Probably should." Neither of them moved. "Or," Caleb said slowly, "the carrots could wait." Abigail laughed, that full, bright laugh he loved so much. "The carrots can wait." The town meeting was Marcus Wells' idea. Caleb heard about it from Floyd Whitlock, who rode out to the ranch with a worried expression, and news that made Caleb's blood run cold. "He's calling for a vote, says the town needs to decide whether to accept the Thornton family as full members of the community." Floyd spat the words like they tasted bad. "As if you haven't lived here for 15 years. What's his angle?" "Same as always, he wants Abigail. Can't have her, so he's trying to make your lives miserable." Caleb's hands curled into fists. "When's the meeting?" "Tomorrow night. Church Hall." "And people are actually going along with this?" Floyd looked away. "Some of them. The ones who still think you brought trouble to Copper Creek. The ones who blame you for the fire, even though Silas Crawford was the one who lit it." "What about the others? The ones who helped rebuild?" "They're scared." Floyd met his eyes. "Marcus has been making threats. Subtle ones about credit at his store, about business partnerships, about who gets to use the town well during dry season. He's squeezing people, Caleb, making them choose between their livelihoods and their consciences." Caleb felt the old anger rising, the same anger he'd felt standing in that church on Christmas Day, facing down Harriet Dawson's cruelty. "Then I'll go to the meeting. Caleb, I'll go and I'll say my piece, and if the town votes to cast us out—" He stopped, took a breath. "Then we'll find somewhere else to live, somewhere people judge you by your character, not your circumstances." Floyd shook his head. "You shouldn't have to leave. This is your home." "Home is where my family is." Caleb looked toward the cabin where Abigail was teaching Emma to roll pie crust. "And my family goes where I go." The church hall was packed. Every chair was taken. People stood along the walls, crowded in the doorway, pressed against windows, trying to hear. Caleb had never seen so many folks turn out for a town meeting, not even when they'd voted on the new schoolhouse. He walked in with Abigail on his arm and his children behind him. All four of them. Together. The whispers started immediately. Marcus Wells stood at the front of the room looking smug and satisfied. Harriet Dawson sat in the front row, her face unreadable. Pastor Whitmore stood off to the side, Bible in hand, watching everything with careful eyes. "Well," Marcus's voice carried over the crowd, "looks like the Thorntons decided to join us after all. Have a seat, Caleb. This concerns you." "I'll stand." Marcus's smile flickered. "Suit yourself." He turned to address the crowd. "Friends and neighbors, we're here tonight to discuss a matter of community importance. For 3 months now, we've had a situation in our town. A situation that began with an act of questionable judgment and has led to violence, death, and the destruction of property. The only destruction was caused by Silas Crawford," someone called out. "And he's dead." "True," Marcus nodded. "But we must ask ourselves, would any of that have happened if Caleb Thornton hadn't taken in a stranger, if he hadn't defied social convention, if he hadn't—" "Hadn't what?" Caleb's voice cut through the murmuring. "Hadn't shown mercy to a woman and children in need, hadn't done exactly what the Bible tells us to do." Marcus's face reddened. "This isn't about religion." "The hell it isn't." Caleb stepped forward. "You've been hiding behind propriety and social convention since the day Abigail arrived. But let's be honest about what this is really about. And what is it about, in your opinion? It's about you wanting something you can't have." Caleb's voice was cold as iron. You wanted Abigail before she ever came to Copper Creek. You wanted her when she was married to Henry Crawford, and when you couldn't have her, you decided to make her life and mine as miserable as possible." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Marcus's composure cracked. "That's a lie." "Is it?" "Then why did you refuse to sell me supplies the day after she arrived? Why did you spread rumors about her character when you knew nothing about her? Why have you spent 3 months trying to drive us out of a town I've called home for 15 years? Because you broke the rules." Marcus's voice rose. "You took in a widow with no chaperone. You married her without proper courtship. You brought violence and fire to our doorstep. I brought a family to an empty house." Caleb's voice dropped, became something more dangerous. "I brought laughter to a daughter who'd forgotten how to smile. I brought hope to children who'd lost everything. And if that breaks your rules, Marcus, then your rules are broken." Silence fell over the hall. Marcus looked around at the assembled townspeople searching for support, finding less than he expected. "This isn't we need to vote. That's why we're here, to decide. I have something to say." Every head turned. Harriet Dawson rose from her seat. Her face was pale, but determined. "Mrs. Dawson." Marcus looked relieved. "Of course. Please." Harriet walked to the front of the room. She stood beside Marcus, but facing him, not the crowd. "I've known you for 20 years, Marcus Wells. I've watched you build your store, marry your wife, raise your children. I've always thought you were a good man." Marcus puffed up slightly. "Thank you, Harriet." "I was wrong." The words landed like a slap. "What you're doing here tonight isn't about community standards. It isn't about protecting Copper Creek. It's about petty jealousy and wounded pride." Harriet's voice grew stronger. "And I should know because 3 months ago I was doing the exact same thing." She turned to face the crowd. "I led the charge against Abigail Crawford. I convinced the boarding house to throw her out. I whispered in ears and turned neighbors against her. I did everything in my power to make that woman feel unwelcome." Her voice cracked. "And then I watched Caleb Thornton nearly die defending her. I watched a man stand alone against armed criminals while the rest of us hid behind our curtains. And I realized something." She looked at Caleb, at Abigail, at the children clustered together watching with wide eyes. "I realized that courage isn't doing what's comfortable. It's doing what's right, even when everyone around you says you're wrong. Caleb Thornton showed more courage in one night than I've shown in 50 years. She faced Marcus directly. "I won't vote to cast this family out. And I don't think anyone else should either." For a long moment, no one moved. Then Doc Hendricks stood up. "I vote they stay." Martha Doyle struggled to her feet. "I vote they stay." Floyd Whitlock. "They stay." Pastor Whitmore. "They stay." One by one, people rose. Not everyone there were holdouts, people too afraid of Marcus, or too set in their ways to change. But enough, more than enough. Marcus Wells stood alone at the front of the room, watching his power crumble. "This isn't over," he said quietly. "Yes, it is." Caleb stepped forward. "Go home, Marcus. Find something else to be angry about, because this family isn't going anywhere." Marcus's face contorted. For a moment, Caleb thought he might do something stupid, take a swing, make a threat, something that would give Caleb an excuse to finish this properly. Instead, Marcus turned and walked out of the church hall. The door slammed behind him. And then, people were crowding around, shaking Caleb's hand, hugging Abigail, telling the children how brave their papa was. Caleb barely heard any of it. All he could see was Abigail's face, the tears streaming down her cheeks, the smile that could have lit the whole Wyoming territory. "It's over," she whispered. "It's really over." He pulled her close. "It's just beginning." The months that followed were the happiest of Caleb's life. Spring turned to summer. The ranch flourished. Caleb's carpentry business recovered, and then some people came from as far as Silverton to commission furniture from the man who'd stood against outlaws and town councils alike. Abigail started a small herb garden that grew into something larger. Doc Hendricks sent patients to her for remedies he couldn't provide. Women who'd once whispered behind her back now knocked on her door for advice on everything from colicky babies to difficult husbands. The children thrived. Lucy grew taller and bolder, defending her siblings against any remaining cruelty with the fierce protectiveness she'd inherited from her father. Jacob came out of his shell, finally allowing himself to laugh and play and be a child again. Emma forgot entirely that there had ever been a time before the Thorntons were her family. And through it all, Caleb and Abigail fell deeper in love. Not the desperate survival-driven love of those first months. Something steadier, stronger, built on shared meals and quiet conversations, and the 1,000 small moments that make up a life together. One evening in late summer, Caleb found Abigail sitting on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains. "Room for one more?" She smiled and shifted to make space. He sat beside her, taking her hand. "I've been thinking." "Dangerous pastime." He chuckled. "True. But I've been thinking about something specific." "What?" "About what comes next." He turned to face her. "We've spent so much time fighting the town, fighting Silas, fighting for our right to exist as a family. But that's over now. So I keep wondering, what do we build with this peace we've won?" Abigail was quiet for a moment. "I've been thinking about that too. And I think..." She took a breath. "I think I want another child." Caleb went still. "What?" "I know it's sudden, and I know we have 4 already. We have 4 amazing children. We do." Abigail's hand moved to her stomach. "But I keep imagining what it would be like. A baby that's truly ours, yours and mine. A beginning that isn't wrapped in tragedy." Caleb's heart was pounding. "Are you..." "I don't know yet." She met his eyes. "It's too early to tell. But I wanted you to know. Wanted to see if you..." He kissed her. Hard enough to stop her words, soft enough to show his answer. "Yes," he said when they broke apart. "God, yes. 100 times yes." Abigail laughed through sudden tears. "You're sure we'd be starting over?" "I started over the night you knocked on my door." Caleb touched her face. "Everything good in my life started that night. Why wouldn't I want more of it?" They sat together as the sun finished setting, hands intertwined, hearts full of possibility. And somewhere inside Abigail something new was already beginning. The baby came in early spring. A boy, healthy and squalling with his father's dark hair and his mother's stubborn chin. They named him Samuel, after Caleb's son who died. After a grief finally laid to rest. "He's perfect," Lucy breathed, peering at her new brother. "Can I hold him?" Carefully, Abigail transferred the bundle to Lucy's arms. "Support his head." "I know, Mama. I've held Emma before." Emma was bigger. Jacob and Emma crowded close, fighting for the best view. The new baby blinked up at them with unfocused eyes, probably wondering what all the fuss was about. Caleb stood in the doorway, overwhelmed. 5 children now. A wife he adored. A home filled with noise and chaos, and more love than he'd ever thought possible. And all of it started with a knock on his door. "Caleb." Abigail's voice was tired but happy. "Come meet your son." He crossed the room and knelt beside the bed. Abigail put Samuel in his arms, and Caleb held his boy for the first time. The baby was so small, so fragile, so perfect. "Hello, Samuel," Caleb whispered. "Welcome to the family." The baby yawned. And Caleb Thornton, who'd spent 4 years believing his heart had died with Eleanor, discovered that hearts could grow, could heal, could hold more love than seemed humanly possible. "Thank you," he said to Abigail. "For what?" "For everything. For knocking on my door. For staying when everyone told you to leave. For giving me this life." Abigail touched his face. "You gave me the same thing. A second chance. a family, a home. Guess we saved each other. Guess we did. They shared a smile that held years of pain and hard-won joy. The children gathered around them, Lucy, Jacob, Emma, and now Samuel, a family made from strangers who'd become everything to each other. Outside, spring was in full bloom. The town of Copper Creek had changed. Not perfectly, change was never perfect, but enough. Marcus Wells had sold his store and moved to California. Harriet Dawson had become one of Abigail's closest friends. Doc Hendricks had stopped drinking entirely. People still talked, of course. People always talked. But now they talked about the Thorntons with respect, with admiration, with something approaching wonder. Did you hear about the rancher who took in a widow on Christmas Eve? The one who fought off those outlaws? The one who stood up to the whole town for what was right? The story spread. Beyond Copper Creek. Beyond Wyoming. Into territories and states where people heard about the man who'd chosen family over fear, love over safety, courage over convenience. Some said it was a fairy tale. Too good to be true. But Caleb knew better. He knew that every word was real, every tear, every fight, every moment of doubt and terror and desperate hope. He knew because he'd lived it, and he'd do it all again, 1,000 times, 1,000,000 times, for them, for his family, for the life he'd almost missed. The afternoon sun slanted through the cabin windows as Caleb sat by the fire, Samuel asleep in his arms. The other children were outside, their laughter drifting through the open door. Abigail was in the kitchen, humming the same tune she'd hummed that first morning, the one that had made Caleb think Eleanor had come back from the dead. She hadn't, of course. Eleanor was gone, and some part of Caleb would always miss her. But life had moved forward. Grief had given way to gratitude, and in the end, that was all anyone could ask for. Caleb. Abigail appeared in the doorway. Dinner's almost ready. Should I call the children? Give them a few more minutes. He looked down at Samuel, at the tiny fingers curled around his thumb. I want to remember this. Remember what? All of it. He met her eyes. This moment, this feeling. Before the children grow up and the years pass and everything changes. Abigail crossed the room and sat beside him. She leaned her head on his shoulder, one hand resting on their sleeping son. Things will change, she said softly. They always do, but this? She gestured at the cabin, the children outside, the life they'd built together. This is real, and real things last. Caleb pressed a kiss to her hair. How'd I get so lucky? You opened a door. Abigail smiled. Everything else followed. It was true. One simple act of mercy on a winter night had changed everything. Had given him back his daughter, his purpose, his will to live. Had given him a wife, more children, a future he'd never imagined possible. All because he'd opened a door. The children burst inside, cheeks red from playing demanding food, with the casual urgency of the young. Lucy claimed her seat at the table. Jacob helped Emma wash her hands. The new baby stirred, but didn't wake. Caleb looked at them. His family, his miracle, his second chance, and felt peace settle into his bones. Outside, the sun was setting over the Wyoming prairie. Inside, the cabin glowed with lamplight and love. And Caleb Thornton, who'd once thought his life was over, finally understood the truth. Some doors close forever, but the ones that matter, the ones that lead to love, to family, to redemption, stay open. All you have to do is walk through. The Thornton family gathered around the table that night, hands joined, heads bowed. Caleb said grace the way he did every evening, now thanking God for the food, for the roof over their heads, for each other. But tonight he added something new. And thank you, he said, voice rough with emotion, for second chances, for new beginnings, for the courage to start again. Amen, Abigail whispered. Amen. The children echoed. They ate together as twilight deepened into night. They laughed and argued and told stories. They were loud and messy and imperfect. They were a family, and that was everything. Later, when the dishes were done and the children were sleeping, and the house had finally gone quiet, Caleb stood on the porch one last time. The stars blazed overhead, thousands of them, millions, maybe each one a reminder of how vast the world was. How small any single life seemed against such enormity. But Caleb didn't feel small. He felt exactly the right size, exactly where he was supposed to be. Abigail joined him, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders against the cool night air. "What are you thinking about?" "Christmas Eve," he said. "That first knock on the door. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't opened it?" "No." Caleb pulled her close. "Because I did open it, and that's all that matters." She nestled against him, warm and real in his. "I love you, Caleb Thornton." "I love you too, Abigail Thornton." They stood together in the darkness, looking out at the land they'd fought, for the home they'd built, the life they'd chosen. Behind them, their children slept peacefully. Before them, the future stretched wide and full of promise. And in that moment, standing on the threshold between what was and what would be, Caleb Thornton made one final decision. He would never stop opening doors. Not for his family, not for strangers, not for anyone who knocked on a winter night desperate and afraid and hoping for mercy. Because that was what made a house a home. That was what made a family. And that was a truth worth fighting for. Always. Forever. No matter what came next. The door stayed open.